Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 and our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson contained within the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 354 from Cocoon, 4th, A Butterfly. Now, when this poem was published in 1891, it was actually titled The Butterfly's Day, and it is interesting to read so many of Emily's poems in the order of the Johnson edition to recognize certain kinds of, can I say, echoes. When we did our study of T.S. Eliot and especially the four quartets, I commented on those echoes that were always there. When we did our study of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, and we called it Talks with Walt, all of these lectures posted at learnstrong.net, where our assumption is that you've been following our stuff there. You'll remember that we talked about these echoes that start to happen. When you read a poet, you start to sense it happens again and again and again. The new is the new, the N-E-W is the K-N-E-W. And one of the things Emily is clearly interested in is this idea of cycles. The ways in which a day is representative of a life. That is to say, you have a beginning, you have a middle, you have an end, and so we're going to play around with it somewhat here. Our hope is that you've already followed our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our set of introductory comments as well as our preceding 353 poems. If you have, we just finished with 353, A Happy Lit. If you have, then you can place this poem there. Now, I want you to notice in this poem the tone. We'll go from a lighthearted, and this again is not unusual for Emily, from a lighthearted to, are we going to call it a more serious tone at the end? Well, I'll leave that one up to you guys to decide how you see it. Let's enjoy the poem. From Cocoon, 4th, A Butterfly, as lady from her door emerged a summer afternoon, repairing everywhere, without design, that I could trace, except to stray abroad on miscellaneous enterprise, the clovers understood. Her pretty parasol be seen contracting in a field where men made hay, then struggling hard with an opposing cloud where parties, phantom as herself, to nowhere seemed to go, in purposeless circumference as 'twere a tropic show. And notwithstanding be that worked and flower, that zealous blue, this audience of idleness disdained them from the sky, till sundown crept, a steady tide, and men that made the hay and afternoon and butterfly extinguished in the sea. Of course, at the end of the poem, that is to say, the sun is going down, light is fading, and therefore all of the marvels that she's been watching, she can't see anymore. Now, we have said this when we did our Dante study, and again, you can run it to ground at learnstrong.net. We said Dante is at the same time the most universal of poets and the most specific of poets. We would say something very similar, of course, of Emily. We would say it of all great poets, right? That is to say, Wallace Stevens comes to mind, obviously. Poets that are able to put a certain kind of specific eye on something and then yet make some kind of universal statement about what it is from the specific. It's quite a powerful thing that Emily can do. Notice, literally this poem is the movement from cocoon to butterfly. In other words, the process, the growing process throughout the day. Cocoon will take us back to poem 129. Butterfly obviously takes us back to our study of poem 66. And then the interesting simile as lady from her door emerged. In other words, the butterfly coming out of cocoon is like a woman going for a walk a summer afternoon, repairing everywhere. Her use of the word repairing is wonderful, right? Without design, that also is a remarkable insight. In other words, there's a certain freedom that she identifies with the butterfly. And I'm really hopeful that you guys, the next time you see a butterfly flying, you'll think of 354. And in fact, you'll go back and read this again. And you'll think about the way in which a butterfly moves, but there doesn't seem to be any, consistent reason why. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like it'll light on something for a few seconds, then off it goes, then up it goes, and around it goes. She wants to somehow capture that without design that I could trace, except to stray abroad on miscellaneous enterprise. The clovers understood, right? Lighting maybe on clovers. Her pretty parasol, it's a wonderful way to describe the butterfly be seen, contracting in a field, notice we go from repairing to contracting, where men made hay, directly across from her house. She could see in her daddy's field often this very thing, where men made hay, then struggling hard, notice the use of the word struggling here, right, to to differentiate what the butterfly is doing. Notice the butterfly rarely seems to struggle unless it's with an opposing cloud, right? Where parties, Phantom as herself, you'll remember Phantom when we studied poem 20, to nowhere seemed to go. The butterfly is like a cloud, moving, it seems, endlessly through space without any kind of, her word is design, in purposeless circumference, as 'twere a tropic show. We're back to the parasol. We're back to the lady who is leaving and going out for a walk. In other words, it's this magnificent display, this panoply, if you will. And, along with the working men at the hay, the notwithstanding bee that worked, right? From struggling hard, now it's worked. And flower, that zealous blue, this audience of idleness, disdain them from the sky. There's a sense that the butterfly, who has been ensconced in its cocoon, is now free to go and do whatever it wants. Now, many have seen this as symbolic of Emily talking about her own poetic muse. In other words, don't tell me what to do. I will write what I want to write. This isn't poetry. What are you talking about? This isn't poetry. To which Emily says, I'm like a butterfly. I move on my own spirit without design often, and yet maybe design. This audience of idleness disdained them, maybe that's the key word of the whole poem, from the sky. Till, the key word, the fulcrum word, much like 353 when we said that word but is that fulcrum word, till sundown, and then her verb is fascinating, crept, which is of course the difference, right? Butterflies don't creep. Butterflies have this beautiful movement, but sundown starts to creep. In other words, darker, darker, darker. A steady tide. And the minute we think about tide, we obviously are thinking about any number of texts that come to mind, right? Crossing the Bar of Tennyson and others. This notion of the tide, the water coming in, that exhibits, of course, the end of the day. Notice we'll end with the word sea, right? And men that made the hay, and afternoon, and butterfly, notice the three, right? Extinguished takes us back to poem 259. In the sea. That is to say, the sun goes down, we can't see anymore, and yet notice that sea and cocoon are very, very similar in their symbolism in this poem. In other words, for a brief moment in time, we have this ability to be free, to be released from the cocoon, but we know that sundown is coming. As we have said, you can only swing at the park for a very short period of time. We were taught this as children, weren't we? I don't want to go to the van. I want to keep swinging. No, honey, you can't swing forever at the park. Everybody's got to go to the van. None of us have met any 200-year-old people. The reality is, we've all got to go. Sundown is coming. Enjoy the experience that we have. And I think this is the message at 2A. All things, even the carefree, the butterfly, or the poetic spirit, obviously has to give way to sundown and ultimately find its way back to cocoon, back to sea. At 2B, I love the tone. The tone at the beginning of the poem is very lighthearted, much like the butterfly, and yet by the end, some have called it somber, some have called it serious. I think it's more for Emily a realistic tone. This is the way things are. At 3A, the great scholar David Priest has pointed out that Isaac Watts once wrote in the hymn, O God, our help in ages past, the following, quote, time, like an ever-rolling stream, bears all its sons away. End quote. You can probably, of course, think of the classic line for you that plays the similar game. We get to play for a moment. We always mention in 303 when we come to an idea like this, of course, the great Dickens and, of course, Christmas Carol, the Scrooge story. And, of course, Scrooge has to come to that moment at the end, right? When he sees his own tombstone. And for whatever reason, it's never occurred to him, oh no, that tombstone is coming for you, for me, for all of us. It is inevitable. We know that it is. Finally, at 3B, how do you relate to this poem, and to what degree are you ever involved in the dance of the butterfly? I hope that your reading of Emily's poems is in some ways that dance. Thank you.